Good evening, friends. This is the 27th of September edition of A Quiet Rage. And we've got some things to talk about. First of all, I do want to put a bow on my previous episode regarding the Charlie Kirk assassination, that horrible, horrific crime. The point that I actually wanted to make, the largest point I wanted to make in that video, was that the problem in this country specifically is the guns. There's a mental health problem too, neither of which Republicans are willing to actually, or at least Republicans in Congress are actually willing to address, but it's the guns. The guns are the problem. And we've addressed this problem before in this country, and we saw results, and then we went back on those measures, and here we are. Anyway, the problem is that the discourse around Charlie Kirk was dragged entirely away from the issue. There was somebody, a friend of mine on Facebook, accused me of, he said something along the lines of never let a tragedy go unused or something like that. And I responded, okay, then you tell me when are we allowed to talk about gun violence in this country? You tell me when, and I'll be ready, and we'll have that conversation. Because we keep getting told now is not the time. Well, when the fuck is the time? So that's putting a bow on the previous episode. The two main things I want to talk about tonight are health related. Things that have been in the news lately health-wise from Republicans. And just so the first one is a really good illustration of why a lot of us on the left, you will hear us sometimes say to our compatriots, vote blue no matter who. And this is a prime example of why. The Florida Surgeon General, Florida State's Surgeon General, Dr. Joseph Ladapo, held a press conference. I think it's been like 3 or 4 weeks ago now. This is the topic I had meant to address previously, but there was the assassination, and it actually gave this administration time to give me a second topic, which I'll get to momentarily. So he held a press conference, the Surgeon General, Dr. Ladapo, in which he promised that the state of Florida would be eliminating all vaccine mandates for school admission. And in his, thank you, Bella, in his press conference, he likened vaccine mandates to slavery. Now, normally, I would never dream of telling a black man anything about slavery, except in this particular case, this is this man doesn't know what he's talking about. This is hyperbole to a very high degree. It is, I would go so far as to say, it's fear-mongering. It is a false equivalency that is unbecoming of a man of his stature. A vaccine mandate is no more slavery than seatbelt laws or car seat laws. I don't see the Surgeon General, he claims that he, as the Surgeon General, doesn't have the right to tell you, as a parent, what to put into your children's bodies, what vaccines you have to give your children. Except he doesn't have the right. He has the responsibility. That's what a Surgeon General, that's one of the jobs of a Surgeon General, is to give medical advice, to set medical standards, to set vaccine mandates and standards within his or her state. That's his responsibility. That is one of the things he should be doing. There were people who thought that seatbelts were an infringement upon your rights. Here's the thing: seatbelts, especially, are very much, a seatbelt law is very much like a vaccine mandate for attending school. In this way, it might seem as though not putting on a seatbelt or not getting a vaccine is only potentially harming one individual, the person who doesn't put the seatbelt on, or the person who doesn't get a particular vaccination. However, this is not true with seatbelts, and this is something I was shocked to learn, but afterwards was kind of shocked that I was shocked. It's not just that a seatbelt protects you as an individual from flying through the windshield of your vehicle. The seatbelt also protects the other you wearing the seatbelt also protects the other occupants of the vehicle. Because even if they're belted in and you're not, as the vehicle, depending on what type of collision you're in, especially if it's a rollover or a spin, the other occupants of the vehicle are prevented from being hit by you as a missile inside the vehicle. In the same way, vaccinated school children protect each other from spreading disease. If there's an immunocompromised classmate that can't get a vaccination because their immune system isn't strong enough to fight that off, their classmates form a living, that's herd immunity. Their classmates form a living fence around them. If none of the immunocompromised child's classmates have X disease, whatever it may be, it is far less likely, not impossible, but far less likely that the immunocompromised child will get the disease. We're living in a society here, folks. This is about protecting each other just as much as it is about protecting ourselves.
You know, there's some confusion about what we said. We're not taking vaccines away from anyone. What we said was that if you want them, God bless you. You can have as many as you want. And if you don't want them, parents should have the ability and the power to decide what goes into their children's bodies. It's that simple.
Here we have him talking about parents' rights. I have an issue with this. I'm going to be very candid, but I'm going to try and choose my words carefully. There is nothing about being a parent that automatically means that you know what is best for your child. It's not automatic. It's just not. Do a Google search for mother arrested for, father arrested for, and see what Google adds into your search. I mean, the foster care system exists in part because there are parents who don't know or don't care enough to properly care for their child. We have all, whether it's at Little League, at dance or gymnastics class, or in the pickup line or drop-off line for school, we have all seen other parents and thought, they don't know what in the world they're doing. They are not parenting correctly. And if you're honest with yourself, if you have a child, there's been at least one occasion at which you have thrown your hands up and either looked at your partner or looked at yourself in the mirror and thought or said, what do we do here? What do I do? Nobody's explained or prepared me for this situation. And if you've got more than one child, there's been at least one occasion in which you have said to your partner or looked in the mirror and said to yourself, we didn't have this problem with the first one. What is this? What do we do now? What's the answer here? There's nothing about being a parent that automatically means you know best, or anyone knows best. Any parent knows best. Hey, this is Aaron in editing. I just want to make it clear that I'm not trying to disparage parents in any way. There's a difference between not knowing what's best for your kid and not wanting what's best for your kid. And I'm not saying that parents don't automatically want what's best for their kids, although there are those who don't care. I'm just saying being a parent doesn't automatically qualify you as being 100% knowledgeable about all things involving children. I just wanted to make that very clear. Anyway, back to the video. And that's what surgeons general are for. That's what the American Medical Association is for. That's what the CDC is for, is to tell us what to do when we don't have the expertise to know what to do. It is far too popular in this society currently, the prevalence of people not listening to actual experts. And this is not an appeal to authority. I'm talking about the consensus in the medical community, the consensus in any scientific community. We don't arrive at these things without a great deal of research. And anyway, the other thing about a vaccine mandate, especially for school children, for attending schools, is it has a secondary benefit. A mandate does. It has, tertiary mandate or benefits as well. It has a secondary benefit of forcing either the federal agency or insurance companies to provide these vaccines either free or at very low cost, which that might not be an issue for middle to upper middle class to wealthy families. But, of course, that makes a huge difference to lower middle class and low income community households and communities. The very people we need to protect, who need our protection the most, the people who can afford it the least, a vaccine mandate makes it so that these vaccinations are very low cost or even free for everyone. So there's no barrier to entry for the people who are going to need it the most, the people who, if they get sick, if their child gets sick, have the least ability to properly provide care for them and proper recovery. This is, and it bothers me that this attorney general doesn't seem to understand that.
Before you made this decision to try to lift vaccine mandates for Florida, which include obviously public schools, did your department do any data analysis? Did you do any data projection of how many new cases of these diseases there will be in Florida once you remove vaccine mandates?
Absolutely. So absolutely not, because it's not a, you mentioned whooping cough there. So there's this conflation of the science and sort of what is the right and wrong thing to do. So scientifically, you mentioned whooping cough. So that's an example. This is part of the issue with informed consent. That's an example of a vaccine that is ineffective. The data show that it's ineffective at preventing transmission. So sort of mandates with that really don't have anything to do with the notion of transmission. And then in terms of, like analysis, well, ultimately, this is an issue very clearly of parents' rights. So do I need to analyze whether it's appropriate for parents to be able to decide what goes into their children's bodies? I don't need to do an analysis on that.
So you're trying to lift the vaccine mandate in Florida, and your department and you did not even do a projection as to how this could impact public health. So you have not prepared hospitals in the Florida counties most at risk with the best treatments for any outbreaks of measles, mumps, rubella, whooping cough, polio, and you have not looked into how many kids might now get these preventable diseases? That's what you're saying?
No, that's what you said. What I'm saying is that it's an issue of right and wrong in terms of whether parents should be able to control, have ultimate authority over what happens to their kids' bodies. And in terms of outbreaks, we do have outbreaks in Florida, just like every state, and we manage those. So there are no new special procedures that need to be made.
Right, but you're talking about doing something that no other state has done.
We manage them just as always.
But you're talking about doing something that no other state in the United States has done and removing the vaccine mandate for public schools. You're making a decision that no other Surgeon General in the United States has done. It goes against what's recommended by every top medical organization, including the AMA, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Boston Center on Emerging Infectious Diseases. It goes against what parents in Florida want. 82% of parents in Florida schools said public schools should require vaccines for measles and polio with health and religious exemptions. It goes against what Senator Rick Scott, a Republican from Florida, wants. He thinks sticking with a religious exemption is fine. It goes against the Florida Medical Association, which in the past has backed Governor DeSantis. So all of these people are wrong, and you are right.
Again, sort of casting it in that way is not what I would do. Is not how I look at it.
It's a fact.
You look at
Again, this is very concerning. And this is why I say why we on the left say vote blue no matter who. Not because it's impossible that a Surgeon General, and I'm fairly certain Surgeon General is an elected position in the state of Florida. I don't know. I haven't looked it up. But it is far less likely that someone on the left is going to say something like, absolutely not, we haven't done any projections to try and prepare our hospitals, our healthcare system for these. It's very disturbing that he would say that. All right, so my second thing is that I want to talk about is something you cannot have missed if you've been paying the least bit of attention to the news, which is, or just, social media, just the memes that have come out since. The president of these United States, President Donald Trump, our president, made an announcement flanked by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the Secretary of Health and Human Services, and Dr. Mehmet Oz, the head of Medicine and Medicaid Services, I think. First of all, I feel it's very important to point out that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Donald J. Trump are idiots. They're morons. They don't know what they're talking about. They have no expertise in the medical field whatsoever. So there's that. Also, it's important to remember that Donald Trump and Mehmet Oz are both grifters. They love nothing more than selling you some snake oil. And if anybody wants to try and say, well, you guys on the left, you love Oprah, I want to make this very clear. Fuck Oprah. She gave us Dr. Oz. She gave us Dr. Phil. Two people who have done a fair amount of damage to our understanding as a society of what is actual medicine. So, as I was thinking about planning mentally what I was going to say in this video, there was something I was hesitant to talk about. And that is that, well, what I was going to say is something along the lines of, it's been said, some people say, when they're talking about autism and other medical maladies, that clearly there's something in our American society, something that we are doing that is causing a higher incidence of autism in particular, because you don't see, there's hardly any reported cases of autism in the Amish community. And I thought, actually, that whole some people say, a lot of people are saying line, where have I heard that before? From Donald Trump. So, yeah, I wasn't going to use it. Except, this happened.
There's something artificial. They're taking something. And by the way, I think I can say that there are certain groups of people that don't take vaccines and don't take any pills that have no autism. Does that tell you something? That's currently, is that a correct statement, by the way?
There are some studies that suggest that, with the Amish, for example.
The Amish, yeah, virtually I heard none. See, Bobby wants to be very careful with what he says, and he should, but I'm not so careful with what I say. But you have certain groups, the Amish as an example, they have essentially no autism.
So now I get to talk about it because I have someone to quote, and it's the Secretary of Health and Human Services. Entirely out of his depth and unqualified as he is, I can quote him now. He said it right there. And the thing to note, and in his defense, and you're not going to hear me say that very often, in defense of the Secretary of Health and Human Services, he was put on the spot there, and he didn't. If he had a study to quote, he wasn't. I don't blame him for not being ready for that. I'd be curious to see that study. I don't believe that. Well, here's the thing, okay? There's a phenomenon in data collection known as survivorship bias. If you've ever heard of this term, you may also be familiar with this graphic. Now, this comes from data that was collected on fighter and bomber aircraft. This was a fighter jet, or fighter aircraft in particular, returning from battle. And it might have been a bomber. Anyway, it's an aircraft. It's a World War II aircraft. So, and all these red dots are places where the returning aircraft took fire, had battle damage, but were able to return to base and be repaired. The error that is sometimes made, and the urban legend about this particular photo, which may or may not be true, is that the initial response by aircraft mechanics and designers and engineers was, well, we need to put more armor on these red spots, on the areas where these red spots are. And it might, at first glance, that might be what any of us would say. But if you take a moment to pause and think about it, this graphic shows you what this information is actually telling you, what this data is actually telling you, which is that you need to armor these areas because it's the planes that are taking damage in these areas that are not returning to give you the information you need about them as individual aircraft. And as a brief aside, I've had comments telling me that I shouldn't be using Wikipedia as a source. Well, I don't care what you think. If you're trying to tell me that I shouldn't use that, I don't care what you think. I'm going to keep using it, and this is why. Just this one article on survivorship bias has all of these sources cited in this one article. So if I need to learn more, I can learn more. This doesn't just come out of nowhere. Wikipedia back in the day, yeah, might have been a bad source. Not anymore. It's vastly improved. And it gave me this little gift as an example. It talks about the military aircraft in World War II, but it also talked about cats. And how, in at least one study performed in 1987, it was reported that cats who fell from less than 6 stories are still alive. and have greater injuries than cats who fall from higher than 6 stories. But when you think about it, the immediate answer is, well, perhaps the reason that cats who fall from greater than 6 stories have fewer injuries is because the cats that fell from those heights died and didn't get taken to the veterinarian. Why do I bring up cats? Because this leads me back to the Amish. Why is there almost zero incidents of reported, a very important word in this sentence, reported autism in the Amish community? It's because they're not being evaluated, because Amish parents don't know that there's necessarily anything out of the ordinary with their child that is diagnosable. They don't have an understanding of autism. They don't go to public schools with their peers. So they don't have teachers that are trained to look for signs of autism and developmental issues. So of course we have nearly zero reported cases of autism in the Amish community. Am I focusing too much on a single point? Maybe. Am I hyper-focusing? Maybe. But it's indicative of why both Trump and RFK are wholly out of their depths and unqualified for the jobs that they're holding, because they don't actually understand the information. They don't understand. They don't have the intellectual curiosity to dig a little deeper. So if ever anybody tries to get snarky with me and say, oh, you think you could be a better Secretary of Health and Human Services? Literally, yes. Because you would not catch me saying some dumb shit like that. Anyway. So Trump also talked about how 10, 20 years ago, the reported number of autism cases per 20,000 was 1 per 20,000 children. Then it became 1 in 10,000, and now, according to him, it's 1 in 12 boys in California. Well, again, he doesn't understand statistics. He doesn't understand the data about which he is trying to speak. For one thing, very recently, like in the last 5-10 years or so, we have started, the medical community has started to recognize and fix the fact that most of the autism evaluation was based on how young boys present autism, and we've gained an understanding that young boys and young girls will present autism in different ways. So literally 50% of the population wasn't being, if they were being evaluated for autism, wasn't being evaluated properly. And we're improving that. It's not perfect. But we're improving our ability to diagnose autism. So of course, when you improve your ability to diagnose something, yes, the reported diagnoses are going to rise. We have a better understanding of autism now, in general. So reported diagnoses are going to rise. We have a better understanding that autism is a spectrum. Autism is not just nonverbal, hyper-focusing, people that are basically unable to interact with society. It's a spectrum. You can be just a little bit autistic. I shouldn't say it that way. You can present slight, or it's a spectrum. I shouldn't try and say any more than that. It's a spectrum. I'm not a medical professional. This is not my area. I just have a basic understanding of statistics and better understanding than RFK and Trump and that fuckhead Mehmet Oz, apparently. Also, how many? I'm in my 40s. I don't know a whole lot of people my age that have been tested for an autism diagnosis. I know one person that's going through it right now. And I know a couple of people that could probably benefit from an autism diagnosis. But it's not like it was a common thing. And it's not as though we test 100% of school children for autism. There may be school systems that do. They evaluate all children for autism. But for the most part, it's the children that are having social and developmental difficulties who are being evaluated. The person that I know that's going through the evaluation right now learned at a very young age to mask, to adapt to a normie behavior. So that, because the way that their autism presented itself were seen as rude and disruptive and annoying. So they learned to mask, and that's a lot of people on the autism spectrum that are able to that are not, profound, don't have profound autism. That's people that need lifelong care, that are largely nonverbal, that can't, don't have the ability to interact with society. And those people definitely exist. And I'm going to link a video to a guy named Hank Green. If you don't already know about him, he's fantastic. He's got a whole thing about some of the data that was presented by Trump, and can talk much better about this than I can, because he's much smarter than me, and took the time to actually read all of the studies. Anyway, people with the incidence of profound autism is increasing ever so slightly over the last 20, 30 years. Not enough to really be statistically relevant, necessarily. Anyway, if we tested every single school kid, if we tested every single person in America, we would get different information. We would get different data than what we have right now, is what I'm saying. And people who have autism, I should have said this right from the start. We owe it to them to say out loud that autism is not something to be cured. It is not a disease. It is simply a different way for a brain to develop. And autistic people, people with autism, however you want to say, whichever phrasing you prefer, that they are fully capable, fully deserving members of our society. We joke. I've said before, I'm a retired submarine sailor. There's a group chat that I'm in from my first boat, and the nuclear trained electricians and mechanics and laboratory technicians, they joke with themselves like, yeah, if we tested everybody that goes through nuke school for autism, because that's a disqualifier for submarine service, we wouldn't have a nuclear program, because there would be. Autism is not a thing to be cured. It's a thing to be understood. It's a thing to be studied. And there are several people in my life, including my niece, who are on the spectrum. And the best thing for them is for them to understand, and for us to understand, what it is, how it affects them, and how we can assist. Sometimes autistic people have a very short social battery, and when they're done when they're done peopling, they just need to be able to leave and go to a quiet place and have people not think that they're being rude. It's a simple thing. And if we can try and remove this stigma, which the president and the health and all those knuckleheads at that press conference did us no favors, if we can try and remove that stigma, then we can do stuff like that. We can help our autistic friends not feel like they have to hide, not feel like they have to mask who they are. Anyway, so what can we do? Well, when these knuckleheads like Dr. Ladapo and the Trump people, when they say these things, we need to push back. We need to take a minute and look a little deeper into what they're saying, because they're not going to. And we need to be kinder to each other, especially people that have been taught to mask who they are and what they are, because they don't necessarily understand. This all very much bothers me. And we need to vote blue no matter who, because even somebody who you wouldn't think could fuck things up for people, like the Surgeon General of Florida, because it's not just going to be Florida. Florida is not an island, and people are coming and going out of Florida every day, and they're going to have greater incidence of preventable diseases because this idiot doesn't understand what vaccinations mandates are really about. And get vaccinated, and encourage everyone that's not immunocompromised around you to get vaccinated. It's just, it's the way, it's the best thing for it. It's fall now. COVID and flu are coming around. Get your vaccinations. Also, early voting has started here in Virginia for a couple of elections. So, I'm sure if there's an election in your area that there are plenty of signs. I'm sure that will not have escaped your noticing. But get out there. If you get out there and vote early, if you don't think you can vote on election day, and encourage others to do so as well. And as always, gather with, find your local organization, gather with your people, volunteer to be a poll watcher. There's a lot of good work being done out there. Yeah, that's all I got for you. We have to pay attention to this data because the people that should be aren't. So I'm not saying do your own research. I'm saying pay attention to the data. Anyway, I'm done now. If, like me, you understand that we need better qualifications for people in these positions of public health, and that we should not be denigrating people that have autism, and that Tylenol has no real link, no demonstrable link to autism, and that autism doesn't need to be cured, then keep your powder dry and keep your quiet rage. Good night, my fellow Americans.